Hello YouTube and welcome to 325 patch notes recap. This one has been a huge one and they've added so many things that this video might be up to 20 minutes long. First things first, sorry. Second thing second, if you see some chat, that's people on the stream as we are doing this live. So anyways, the recap, they've changed a lot of things. The base game has been changed. The passive ascendancies, the actual ascendancies, like there. Hello, chat. We're here, indeed. So all of that has gone through a lot of changes, and we are going to do a recap. We currently have a new retaliate mechanic, which is basically when conditions are met, whether you block, whether you get hit or do something that it's basically like a counter attack. Now they're finally going into counter attack route. We had retaliate before, especially if you remember the shield surrender, and there are going to be different gems and different passive skill points on the tree to do this mechanic. This is of course all experimental. We will see how the meta shifts, if the meta shifts, and we will see how that goes. Anyways, we have Rupture Gem instead of Ascendancy, which is crit bleed possible for all. Most notable crit bleed Gladiator. We will see how that goes. I will most likely make that build. New better endgame bases with more armor, evasion, energy shield ward. New 5 chisels that add more currency, div cards pack size, and so on. Prismatic oil, new oil that adds new hidden annoyance. Now for melee. Melee got in general between a 50 and 75% buff. It's more leaning towards 75% buff. If you remove all the added physical things that they've removed, and if you add all the increased base additions to the game. So melee got buffed by a huge margin. Totems, melee totems are dead. Now, ballistas as totems have been buffed slightly as well, but that seems to be a check. When it comes to banners, banners are now limited time buffs instead of an aura. And how do you do those? Is basically now instead of them reserving mana, now you just place them and you get their buffs. Now, Awe and Terror Cluster for Explodion banners is a new thing. They've added more passive points for banners to compensate, but now we won't need to use banners for like extra buffs and things as they are limited time buffs. Rage got a rework with quicker regen, more passives on tree. And Ravenous Passion, RIP Caster Rage, it got gutted. Max Rage nerfed to Oblivion on items, halved or even more. And Berserker, 1% of attack speed per 1 rage, 50% rage effect. Warcries exert twice of attacks. Now, when it comes to tinctures, tinctures are coming to core, and they're inherently melee, but wardens can make them ranged. Cooldown sharing, magic unique ones, NPCs that sell tinctures too, and passives in tree to increase effect of tinctures. Now they removed counter attack skills, but we've gotten retaliation for it, new gems instead of those, and that's on tree. For endgame, 6th map device slot, 5th and 6th slot are unlocked now by 10 boss maven and tier 17 completion. That's how you unlock them. Either or is how far we understood it. So if you got tier 17 first before 10 bosses, then you can get 10 bosses for 6th slot and vice versa. Wildwood happens in tier 16, which is great. It's reworked a little bit, so like quantity is removed, but we'll get to that. Nameless Seer drops in tier 17s and 16s and 17s, plus it can scry a map. Nameless Seer gives you a unique item of choice, and scry a map basically means you flip the divine cards from one map to another. On that note, divine cards now show on mouse hover over the map in the map atlas itself. So you can change divine cards that drop from one map to another using the Nameless Seer. Search box works for divine cards as well. King of the Mists fragments happens now from ritual. So you get the invitation from ritual encounters, from basically buying from favors, and then you can go kill him. And he doesn't drop that which was taken, but he's dropping now the previous Piranda's Jewel. That's, I forgot the name, never mind, but it gives the Piranda's Jewel passives. So if you want to make P-Concom bouncing for chaos damage, you will still be able to do it. It just won't be called Piranda's Jewel. It will be called whatever King of the Mists call it. Tier 16 maps. Calandra's Reflective Mist doubles the properties of the jewelry item, either positive or negative. So you can have a ring with minus 50 life or plus 100 life. Tier 16 maps, Sentinels have gone core. You pick them up in that map. You activate them whenever. When you leave the map, this is apparently how it's going to work. When you leave the map, you do not get the Sentinel back. You have to find it again in a new map. So use it whenever you find it. All monsters can now drop maps instead of just some of the monsters that can drop maps. However, if the more monsters, the more maps you get per map, you basically are going to get less and less. So I suppose it's going to be like around 5 maps cap or something like that. Sort of works like tier 17s. Combining scarabs into one, which is a scarab buff, which means 2 effects of scarabs are now combined to 1. Experience shrines have been gutted, nerfed, they do not exist anymore. Tier 17 nerfs with life and damage, modifiable with Chaos Vow and Chisels, double anointed amulets from Blighted Ravaged maps, Ultimatum monsters again finally drop items, and Black Morrigan is core for beasts, but there's no more Scarab of the Shadowed Crow. What does this mean? It means that if you're doing Einkar, from time to time you're going to encounter unique monsters, and that unique monster can be Black Morrigan. It's going to make it a little bit more expensive to get a 6-link. Valdos boxes are way more common now, but loot is basically the same. Opening them, so they just swap the percentages out. Before it was rare Valdos map, high percent chance to obtain a Mage Blood. Now, very high drop rate for Valdos map, but low percent chance to drop a Mage Blood. According to their numbers, the amount of Mage Bloods is the same in the game. Delirium is now 15 waves. Is basically from waves 16 to 30. They've disabled waves 1 to 15. More bosses, and that gives you more voices. So usually you had like 5 to 7 bosses. Now you're going to have like 15. Allegedly. Ritual, Spectre Corpses as rewards, and Old Corpses from Affliction as rewards too. Archdemon Crown, +2 Socketed Skill, -2 Socketed Support Gem. Socketed Skill Gem instead of the other things that it had. Sinistro Gloves are now Trapper Gloves. Basically a rework of Ritual bases, and the lowest tier of Ritual items do not drop anymore. Just the regular ones drop, and the tier 1 drop in tier 16 plus. Back to basics, bye-bye. Atlas passive rebalance. Less quantity in general or removal of quantity it is. Blighted maps, and Blight in general has been buffed in maps, pardon. Monster item rarity quantity. Player item quantity reduction. Extreme nerf bat. No more item quantity. Item rarity has been added as higher number to compensate. However, there won't be any more like those extreme loot explosions as you've been seeing. MF in shambles. Item rarity stays, and most items swapped to get more. Venter's Gamble got Mana Reservation Addition, which is a very big buff. So it's from -15 to +15% Mana Reservation Efficiency. Very good. Player balance. Player spawned corpses are no longer affected by mods on maps. Keep that in mind. Endurance charges now have 4 additional ele damage reduction instead of elemental resistance. Dual wielding now has 20% chance to block attack damage and 10% more attack speed instead of what it had before, like 15. Skill gem changes. Very, very big spoilers ahead because melee got buffed a lot. Divine Blessing got removed, RIP, and a lot of gems had mana cost rearranged. Berserk gem also got gutted, and POB warriors are in shambles because they use that to buff up their damage numbers like mad. Call to Arms is now used for slammage, but it's nerfed for One Cry because it is 15% mana reservation per cry that you use. Cleave of Rage got buffed a lot. Added a lot of scaling from level 1 to 20 gems. Banners are no longer auras, we talked about that one. Determination in Grace nerfed by around 50%, only on flat, what they add. But gear got multiplier instead of increase on quality. So, oh, and there are better bases as well that can be found in tier 17 maps, which overall should mean that we are going to have more armor and more evasion when it comes to final numbers of them. Enduring Cry got gutted. There's no more region, inherent region. It's now like increased life region and such. Ensnaring Arrow, enemies no longer count as moving, but there is a modifier that's going to, I'm going to refer to it later, that will give your bleeds damage like the enemies are moving. So no more need to swap to Ensnaring Arrow. Flesh and Stone is now acting like half pride, like it's 25% aura, that's around 20% damage increase, but you just need to swap between like flesh and stone, between blood and sand stance, but it's basically half pride aura now. Unearthed Corpse level scaling at like down from 80 to 70. And Vortex scaling nerf. There's also Desecrate Corpses, max level is 80, down from 100. DD in shambles, they're shaking in their boots, finally. Mostly buffs, some nerfs, RP banners, and rebalancing. Val skills got buffed too. That's the gist of it. Now, support gems, infused channeling gives 10% less damage taken from hits. Any hit, elemental, chaos, or physical, whatever, not like before with the tag. Trauma got nerfed. Ascendancies. Berserker. Crave the Slaughter now gives... Every rage gives 1% attack speed. Rite of Ruin gives 50% increased rage effect. Warbringer gives Warcries exert twice as many attacks, and previous versions have been removed. Chieftain. Tau Hoa, goodbye. It cannot roll on anything. Arohungui replaced by Sion, which gives Warcries have infinite power and 30% Warcry buff effect. So it's moved from Berserker to Chieftain, and to Kohama now needs Sion instead of Tau Hoa. That's basically the swap. Jug. Unrelenting, no more Chaos Res and LA damage reduction, but now gives 1% additional LA damage reduction per endurance charge. Unbreakable, no more 8% of armor to damage taken from hits, but now has 15% of armor applies to chaos damage taken from hits, and it's probably to balance these two out. More testing needed. Champ. Unstoppable hero, swap positions with Fortitude, but now provides nearby allies count as having fortification equal as yours. Previous version, dead. Fortitude, you have 15 fortification down from 20. Nerf. Inspirational, now grants when you leave banner's area, recover 30% of valor consumed by that banner. Valor is basically the same as we had before. Kill enemies, get valor. Use banner, banner gets boosted by valor. Gladiator, now this is where it becomes interesting. Gladiator got a very, very huge change. The War of Attrition gives 1% more damage per 1 second of combat with the enemy, up to 100%. If you fight the boss for 100 seconds, that boss is gonna take 100% more damage, like double damage. Determined Survivor, gain 50% base chance to block from equipped shield and doubles the dual wielding bonuses, which is block and attack speed. Thank you for the follow, by the way. More than skill. Block, attack, spell lucky if you blocked recently. Requires Determined Survivor. Measured Retaliation. Retaliation skills can be used for plus 2 seconds and 50% chance for them to remain usable after use. You can now, in theory, make a build with full Retaliation without a problem and not like fight against enemies. So there's that. Now, when it comes to Gratuitous Violence, bleeding enemies you kill explode, dealing 20% of max life as fizz damage, which is buffed from 10, but you don't get more bleed damage. Jagged Technique, bleeding you inflict is aggravated. That's the new thing, requires Gratuitous. And aggravated bleeding means bleeding you inflict is inflicted as if a target was moving. And Weapon Master, Varunastra, Enjoyers Assemble. It gives you more mods of anything, attack speed, crit, whatever, based on the weapon that you are currently using. Deadeye is Deadeye, which, fun. Rupturing is now Avidity, so they removed Rupturing, we'll get there. Avidity grants 5% more accuracy per Frenzy Charge, and 1 to max Frenzy Charge, and gain 1 Frenzy Charge per 1 second while moving, which is a really good thing. So they moved from Raider to Deadeye. Rupturing is now a support gem, which means crit bleed can be obtainable for Gladiator. It's a very important thing that they added that, because nobody could use like crit bleeds, and they've also added some crit bleed on passive trees. Gathering Winds. 10% tailwind effect, down from 15. Wind Ward, 4% less damage taken per gale force, up from 3. But Far Shot no longer provides Far Shot, but gives projectiles gain damage as they travel farther, dealing up to 30% more damage to targets. It has been halved. Warden, which is ex-Raider. This is the newest ascendancy, so they are gutting Raider and they are introducing Warden. Warden does still do elemental damage, but it now focuses on tinctures too. Warden has 3 oaths. Oath of Spring. Shocks from hits increase damage taken by 2% and maximum 50 stacks on each enemy, for a total of 100% damage increase. Oath of Winter. Enemies you freeze remain frozen for 2+ seconds, and freezing hits that do not freeze grant Hoarfrost, and Hoarfrost increases freeze duration by 20% per stack. Oath of Summer. Instead of Ignite, apply Scorch, and you can apply an additional Scorch to each enemy. How this is making it sound, it seems like because Scorch reduces all elemental resistances by 30, this means this will reduce elemental resistance by 60. Will that be the case in the game? Is what we're going to find out. But this is very, very interesting, because Scorch apply for elemental penetration applies after inversion. Avatar of the Wilds grants level 20 Unbound Avatar skill, and it says gain 1 Unbound Fury when you inflict an elemental ailment with a hit on an enemy, any elemental ailment. Your hits always inflict freeze, shock, and ignite while unbound, and 80% more elemental damage while unbound. Requires one of oaths to connect. It's a 2-pointer, requires a previous oath, and this is 0.2 seconds cooldown per ailment. So if you are doing like 3, 4, 5 ailments, that will give you an insane amount of Unbound Fury, and then you click the button, probably, and it's like the previous Berserk, and then there's that. Enduring Suffusion. Tinctures linger for half a second per mana burn, up to 6 seconds max, 30% less mana burn rate. When you use a tincture, your mana starts burning faster and faster until you cannot sustain the tincture, and then it has a cooldown. Seasoned Hunter. Tinctures also apply to ranged weapons. Very important. Experienced Herbalist allows +1 tincture to be active, so you can use 2 tinctures at the same time, but it requires one of those 2. Mother's Teaching grants level 20 Bark Skin, which is an aura that it was 25% reservation affliction, if I'm not mistaken, and it gives you more armor and evasion rating based on if you have or haven't been hit recently. And then if you have been hit recently, you get more evasion. If you haven't been hit recently, you get more armor. That's basically it. Lesson of the Seasons gives you -15 to Fire Cold Lightning damage taken from spell hits per bark, and prevent 2% suppressed spell damage per bark below maximum, and lose 1 bark when hit by an enemy spell. Ascendant. Ascendant had changes because of the other changes. Berserk, Inherent Rage Loss starts 1 second later, lose 1 rage of hit. Chieftain, you are losing 1 rage of hit. Chieftain, 20% Warcry buff effect, but you lose totems. Deadeye, gain a frenzy charge every 3 seconds while moving, but you lose long shot, which is basically far shot. Gladiator gives 25% chance to aggravate bleeding, 50% base chance to block from shield, double dual wield values, and deal 1% more damage every second, stackable to 50, but lose the previous ones. Raider, which is now Warden, gives attack damage penetrates 8% enemy LRS, and 1 extra tincture active, but loses all the Raider stuff from before. Passive skill tree had a few notable things mentioned, but I will just mention the most important ones, which is Val Pact, which is now melee only, Life Leech is instant, and there's no life regen. Passives that had Overwhelm now have % chance for hits to ignore enemy physical damage reduction. This is overall a buff, and Impale got buffed as heck. They've also added Retaliation, Rage, and other stuff like banners on the passive skill tree, but I've already mentioned that one. Uniques had their things rebalanced. Item changes. Item quality based on item level. Lower item level, higher quality per quality currency. Down like... they want you to use quality currency in questing. Quality bonuses are multiplicative now instead of increased. Tainted quality got nerfed to 20%, down from 29 on corrupted items. Life mods on body armor got buff to 175, 189 tier 1, up from 129 max. Essences got another buff as well for that life. Fossil quality removed. Regular jewels can roll suffixes for max res. Many mods for physical as element chaos can no longer roll, so take physical as element or chaos. Wands got buff for attack, speed, and crit. Daggers, scepters, staves got all crit base buff. Also, you cannot use Einhar Beasts to do 30% quality on an item. Now that's 30% quality on a map. Div cards. Div cards, Horned Scarab, Veiled Scarab, Fourth Vow, Owl's Uprising are new div cards that have been added. Monster balance. Essence mobs gain toughness. Toughness means more toughness, less damage they take. 100% is 50% less damage. 200 is 67%. That's basically it. Pinnacle bosses can have up to 50% action speed reduction, 30% previously. Overwhelm on mobs nerfed, which is a good change. Quest rewards, bandits, Kraken, 8% movement speed, 40 life, Alira, 15% Oak. Alira, 15% all res. Aramir, 1 passive, and you get extra passive in another quest. If you think it's valuable, it's valuable. I think it's not. UIQOL, static life bars, waypoint walking, reservation still active through death, harvest 1 click, range pickup of items higher, and of course, for settlers, we've had the game revamped fully with the new mechanics, which I won't cover in patch notes. There is no need to. If you've seen the video, if not, it will be linked in the description of this video. The most notable thing is we now have trading, currency trading as the biggest QOL that I personally wanted for a while. But that's going to be it for the video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, sub if you don't mind. Thank you for watching. Have a good time, and I will see you in the next PoE video. There's a lot of work to be done this league. Have a good one.